See, that's how you make a point. Come around the backside, like, yeah.
Well done.
That's why I'm here.
Welcome to the Thoughts on Digital podcast, ideas and insight about the ever-changing world of digital marketing.
How's it going, everybody? My name's Adam Levine, and today I'm sitting down with Patrice Lumumba Jones. He's the partner and VP of Creative at Enlight Media, and today we're going to be talking about the future of education and a lot about how video really plays into that. How's it going, Patrice?
It's going great.
Awesome.
Going great. Glad to be here.
I was telling you, I've been looking forward to this for a little while. Known you for probably about 10 years now.
Yeah, probably longer than that.
Yeah, you've been working in the education space for a long time. You were over at Pearson Education for a while, but now you're on the other side of this, where you're a vendor now.
Yeah.
Right. So let's why don't you give a little bit of background about who you are, what you do, and how your company is working in the education space.
So I had a long career at Pearson, 23 years in marketing for the most part, then moving into creative in the higher ed space. So a lot of the time I spent was around talking to customers and then creating messaging and informing products that address their needs in the classroom, and that's both students and faculty. And one of the things that I always thought we could do better at was the creation of video that really impacted learning. And I think there were some challenges around doing that with your legacy product being a textbook.
Right.
And then deciding you need to incorporate technology, but then looking at that technology as supplemental, and then the shift to be like, well, maybe the technology should be center stage. And then somebody goes, well, maybe that technology should include video content, right? Which is a whole thing in itself. And so what happens is you're competing for resources between these three things, which actually are fairly cost intensive to create. And so the trade-offs just were not one that you were going to end up being like, and that's it, we're going to make an hour-long documentary on mitosis for students, right? So the video really had, at the point that I left, had not gotten to the point where it was kind of comparable to what you see out here in the consumer market for video. And I think the standards, especially with students, or what they expect from video, I mean, they're consuming Netflix, they're consuming Hulu, they're consuming Apple, whatever, that you can't just be like, hey, I know this video isn't that great, but you understand it's not really our main thing. Nobody cares why your video is not dope. They're just like, this video is not dope.
Right. And that's the key right there. Right. I mean, if your video can't connect with your audience, whether it's the content or just how it looks or how it sounds, it's so important. And then you just lose your audience and you lose your message, and it's you're just talking to nobody at that point. Yeah.
And how it looks and how it sounds may not be the most important thing when you globally, when you say, well, what's but it's the front door. Right. And point. So if it doesn't look good and it sounds terrible, the gold is never going to get found because it wasn't inviting, right? Nobody wanted to walk in and check it out. So, it's not really being superficial to say that it has to look great. It's just the nature of video.
It's a first impression, right? Yeah. And it's also sort of, and I do this whenever I'm watching a TV show or a movie that I haven't seen before. The first, 10, 30 seconds of whatever you're watching, depending on how it looks, depending on how it feels and sounds, from the start whether you're in good hands or not. That's how at least how it makes me feel as someone who does video. But I think as someone who just consumes video, that's how you feel. And if you look at the first thing that you see and you're like, if you have that hesitation, you don't feel like you're in good hands. And then from that moment on, you don't have confidence in the message that's being sent to you.
Right.
So if it's education, from the get-go, you're not only not engaged, you don't really trust what you're hearing because they didn't put in the time and the effort to make the product for you better.
Yeah, unless you're being forced to watch, a slow start is death.
Yeah.
Right? It can't start slow, right? Unless I know this thing, right? Episode 7 of Breaking Bad could start slow.
Sure.
Because I'm already invested. I have expectations. But if I've never seen something before and it's got some winding, like, what is this? I'm not going to get to the good part. And I think that applies to, all kinds of video, not just, entertainment, but unfortunately education too.
Yeah. And pacing is so important too, because even, and we deal with this a lot with our clients. So, we'll have somebody who has every client has 6 hours worth of content to talk about in their 1 minute video, right?
Yeah.
But it's up to us to help figure out how we can curate that and just put the bare minimum of what's needed to get your point across out there and hit you hard right at the start.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, like you said, you're just slow pacing and you're not there and you lose people. Yeah. And unless you're being forced to watch it, you're out.
Yeah. There's another piece of that too, which is in your video, you can't be, this is not a good word, but I'm going to use it just for effect. You can't be so arrogant as to think that once someone has started watching it, then they are riveted and they're committed to watch this thing all the way to the end.
Sure.
Or to focus all the way to the end. And so one of the things you got to be thinking about is, and in education we call it pedagogy, is what are those things that help the person watching this video know what you're discussing, be able to reference it, know how to get out and get back in. Because a lot of times, you see this in sports videos all the time, like shows on ESPN where there'll be a ticker on the right telling you where you are in a sequence of topics, and then there's another ticker along the bottom that's telling you what we're talking about right now. And I know some of those guys, and one of the producers was telling me that the reason they do that is because they know if you look away, you check a text message on your phone and you come back, we want you to quickly be able to pick up and know where you are. Because no one's going to sit there and go, oh, what are they talking about?
That's really smart.
That's when people hit the channel, right?
That's really
smart. But I think there's applications of that exact same principle to educational video.
Oh my God, yeah.
Right? If I'm a student, right, and because of course students have, these super intense and long attention spans. Right? But they get distracted.
Right.
Right? And yeah, you can play, well, they'll pause and rewind. Or they'll be like, okay, let me go do something else. So why don't we try to figure out ways to give them a progress bar to know where they are.
It just makes sense.
And a map to know where we're going.
Yeah.
And that should just be standard, I think, for educational video.
That really does make sense.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that before. That makes sense to me as I don't know why we're not doing that, whether that's in the video or in a player, embedded in some sort of player that's on the same screen. That's brilliant. Because you're right. The attention spans are zero, and they're going to look away and they're not going to pause it. Let's be honest. Right. They're not. Unless there's a test on what they're watching, they're not going to pause it, so they can come back and still pick this stuff up.
Yeah.
And as long as you're also teaching it in a way that's communicating in a bit of a broad enough stroke that still gives the idea that if they miss 2 seconds, they're not going to get tripped up.
And maybe it's funny you talk about pausing, or maybe we should instruct students to pause sometimes, right? Because so there's things you don't want to do, right? You don't want to put too many words on screen.
Sure.
Right, but also some of the diagrams that you may put up to illustrate a concept, right? You can't just sit back and let someone absorb a diagram for 8 minutes, right? But it still may be important to show that thing, but maybe you give some directions, right, along the margin that say, hey, pause this.
Yeah, pause this, take this in, read this at your own time, and when you're done, come back.
Yeah, I'll be here when you get back, right? So, but that kinds of things of being aware of the medium, right? And so don't just be like, well, we're in a video now. We can't break the fourth wall and be like, you should pause this video right now. Yes, you can.
Why not?
You absolutely can do that.
Especially in education.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's more so a tool than it is, like in marketing.
Yeah.
In marketing, you want something quick and snappy, and you want to get the point across, and you want in and out, and you're done. With education, you need to take more time. But if you need to take more time, you might as well make that more focused time. Yeah. And more important.
Yeah. It's a tool.
To your audience. Yeah.
Right. It's a tool. I think that's one of the things that, we talked about kind of big publishers, I think have always wrestled with is understanding, even with the textbook, that the textbook is a tool. I used to say that the textbook is kind of like the user's manual for the class, that your primary source is your instructor.
Sure.
Right? Your next source is your notes. Your next source is probably somebody in your class. Hey, did you know did you understand that? Whatever. And then the last resort.
When all else fails.
Is, all right, I'll have to pull out the book and read it. Now, that's not optimal.
Right.
But I think that's how it is for a lot of students. But if you work at a company that's creating those things, we had a tendency to think of it as if it were actually the center of the course.
Right. It all as though it all starts from there and ends
Right.
there.
But understanding the role that it plays, I think helps you make a better product. Right?
Yeah.
Accepting that it is a tool. And then with the technology, you had an opportunity to come closer to the center because, hey, do your homework here.
Sure.
Right. But even still,
Sure.
it's a tool for doing homework. It's not necessarily the tool for learning, at least not primary learning, right?
Right.
It reinforces things you've already learned.
Right.
And now when we get to video, we say, well, what is video? And people tend to think of it as a replacement for lecture. I think you can do that for people who didn't attend the lecture.
I agree.
But I think, and it's not a replacement for reading. I think what video is something that can work in tandem with reading and in tandem with lecture to make those things better.
Yeah.
Right? So a video that says, hey, you're about to read this section on whatever. As you read this, be thinking about the following questions. One of the things you might notice is that this doesn't add up with that, right?
Right.
So, think about that. And when we come back, maybe that's something you want to ask your professor about in lecture.
Sure.
Or you can go to our other video where we talk about that if
Right.
you don't have access to your professor. But it can make reading better. But the thing about reading that you don't get from video is reading requires you to comprehend, turn what you're comprehending into a picture in your head, and
Sure.
then remember it.
Sure.
That's a deeper level of understanding than kind of passively watching something.
Yep. And it takes a lot more
Yeah.
concentration.
It does. It does, which is why people say, well, eventually everybody's going to learn from YouTube. I'm like, if everybody learns from YouTube, then everybody's going to learn the same thing 20,000 times before it sinks in from YouTube. Because when I go to YouTube to try to figure out how to do something, like in Premiere, I'll go to YouTube like, all right, I need to figure out how to mask something, so I want to I want to move this piece of paper out of a frame.
Sure.
I've gone to the same YouTube video every time I had to do that.
Right.
Because there's no pedagogy
Right.
in YouTube, right? It's just somebody going, okay, first you click on this, then you click on that, then you mask the thing, and then you bring your image back in and boom. And you're like, okay, good, I did it.
Yeah, I'm not retaining
But
that
I didn't
at
retain
all.
it, right? And but I think that's the thing that's missing from a lot of educational video is the context, the setup, and then some way to test my understanding at the end of it, right? There are things that you can take from the book world, I think, like the thing we talked about with the mapping and all that,
Sure.
and apply it to video that makes it a better learning tool. But I don't think those models are out there. Or maybe I just haven't found them, and then this is a business that I'm in now. I am starting to consult with some learning design and learning science people to try to create kind of a model for learning video, and it's not generic, right? It's depending on what kind of thing you're trying to learn. There's the need in a lot of courses to put theory into context, and some of the stuff we're doing with you guys,
Right.
We have a title, theory and context.
Sure.
But if you peel that back a little further, go a little deeper into that, that's a really important thing, right? In international relations, for instance, there are a lot of equations meant to describe how international actors behave.
Sure.
Hearing that as an equation, unless you're a special kind of political science nerd, which I was at one point in my life, is like, woo, I don't know what this is.
No, that goes right over my head.
Right. So being able to take that theory and then explain it in some kind of real life context is really valuable
Yeah.
for you understanding that theory.
Yeah.
Right. For those pictures to pop up in your head when you hear this thing about these variables A, B, and P to the second power somehow tells you whether countries are going to go to war or not. Right. But the video can certainly help you understand that by putting that in a real world situation. So I think that's one thing you need video for. There's also stuff that people just get confused about, and you need some kind of trigger so you remember it. Like if there is some cool animation to show you the difference between convex and concave, which when I was in school, I used to get confused about that.
Sure.
And it'd be like, concave, convex, concave, convex.
Right,
Just something
right.
silly
Just
like
something
that,
like that
like an
with a C,
earworm.
move the,
Right.
make a C that goes up, make a U that goes,
Stuff like that, right? And you
something
can
that
just
sticks.
bury that somewhere. And it's just that something that pops in your head so you never get confused about that thing again.
And I think to your point, honestly, something even if it's a little bit silly, will stick way more than like silly sticks.
Yeah.
Especially if what you're watching isn't about something so heavy, right, that you can't do something like that. If you're just doing, if you're not talking about the Holocaust and you're talking about things that are more, a lot lighter.
Things that are not the Holocaust.
Let's just say anything that's not the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Let's just put the line there. But yeah, basically, you do something that has a fun element to it that maybe someone wasn't even expecting. It doesn't take itself super seriously, but as a result, it's actually helping reinforce the concept.
Yeah, that's our goal.
That's fantastic.
That's our goal. So like, I don't know why silliness would be off limits in the endeavor of getting people to learn.
Yeah. And silliness is universal.
Yeah.
Like, think about your daily life. When you interact with people, there are so many funny people in this world.
Yes.
That no one will know on a larger scale, and that's fine. But those people, like, that's daily life for all of us. So when we try to make these buttoned up, really tight pieces that feel like they're in the institution of education, it seems like it needs to be, sacred.
Right.
But if you just throw a little bit of, fun, a little entertainment into that,
So one of the things
bridging
you can
a
do,
gap.
though, is I think so. Part of that is because there's a persona out there, and that persona is of a college professor, right? And we have this idea that professors are supposed to be serious, and a lot of them are. But what if we back up and we make it not about professors teaching, but maybe more of a peer-to-peer, student-to-student way of teaching, right? And so, like, because this is how my mind works, you're talking about like being silly. Like, if we wanted to talk about empathy and how rare empathy is. And the example was somebody's in a really quiet room in a very serious event, church or whatever, and they come up on stage and they start to talk, but instead they slip out a fart. Right? Hilarious. Farting equals funny. Everybody knows it's funny. But what if I gave you an example and said the one person in a room that does not laugh and actually feels sorry for that person and feels like they need to go up there and do something so they don't feel as bad. So I don't know if they go up there and they fart too or whatever. But that person, that's what empathy is.
That's empathy.
If that was the explanation of empathy in your book, you would never forget what empathy is.
Never forget it.
Right.
Like, I'm always going to think about empathy. When
I thought you were you were starting to feel a little gassy. But you know what I mean? But like that's silly. That's silly, and it would help you remember something. So I don't know why on earth something so rich would be off limits in education.
I think that's the pivot that needs to happen. That's clearly happening, but it's what's happening in a splinter form where you've got guys like you who were a part of those institutions that are now saying, look, the world is changing and we need to be more nimble also. Because I think a lot of the issues that any major large corporation has is it can't get it out of its own way. Yeah. Right? And for no other reason than it's too big. Yeah. It's this giant mass that keeps moving and moving and moving, and to make any kind of changes takes forever. But you have smaller players come off of that who are already aware of the situation and the problems and how to fix things. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and she said that she actually came from marketing, and she wound up working at a large pharmaceutical company now. And they love her there because they ask her to do something. She does it usually that day, within 2 days, whatever it is. And they look at her like she's a god. Like, how did you do that? And she's like, well, because I just did the thing. Yeah. It's just a different mindset in different industries. Yeah,
it is freeing, being kind of on the entrepreneurial side now, as opposed to being part of a 35,000 person company for 20 years. Sometimes I look around for like somebody should stop me.
Where are the adults?
Yeah, but there's that Shawshank line about of what it is to be institutionalized. It's like when you first get here, and I'm probably going to butcher it. When you first get here, you hate these walls. Then you learn to accept them, and then ultimately you start to depend on them. Yep. And I think there's something to be said about the corporate structure, in that it creates these really comfortable, somewhat low bars around what's expected of you. For instance, there's a problem, something happens. Well, I send an email to one person alerting them of the problem, and now I've done my part. Right. I send an email. It's absolved you of any, responsibilities. You did your part, but now you're relying on 3, 4, 5 other people to handle whatever that is. Right. When you could handle it yourself, maybe. Right. I could have done it. I could have done it. That wasn't your part in the big ladder. Yeah. And then when it blows up. Well, you did your part. Yeah. I go to my sent file. Clearly, I sent Bob an email about this on August 22nd. I'm good. And guess what? Bob's got an email somewhere that he sent to somebody.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. August 25th. He said something else too.
And there we go. So
that's an unfortunate symptom of something that maybe started as a noble endeavor, and it's not to say that, large institutions can't function or can't teach, but the world is changing.
So I think what we're getting to is it's not really the size of the organizations, it's the organization of the organization. It's the structure of the organization. And I think, we used to say stuff like, well, you can't turn a cruise ship on a dime. And you're like, yeah, it's not really that. It's how are you organized? Are you organized to be able to turn on a dime, right? Because Apple's massive.
Right. And they pivot.
All the time.
All the time.
Right. So maybe it's not size. It's the way you're structured.
That's a good point. Yeah. Just knowing that that's the way you're going to operate.
Yeah.
Knowing at the start that if you're going to make a massive shift, it's not going to disrupt the apple cart.
Yeah. But it's also about how tight the pieces are. So here's a golf analogy. So first of all, everybody sucks at golf.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody that has any apprehension or is worried, I don't want to play golf because people will think I'm bad and people will be behind me looking like, oh, what is this guy doing? Go to the driving range and just watch.
It's everybody.
Right. There are people who are, basically taking their life in their own hands, just hitting balls in a stall. It's like you're in the Plinko game, except it's like 3-dimensional, right? So everybody's bad at golf. But the thing about the golf swing, right, and the grip, and that if your hands, whether you interlock or whether you overlap, the tighter your hands are to each other, the better able you are to turn your wrists and actually get speed on your swing. If your hands are apart, like baseball grip are apart, it's really hard to turn your hands over. If your company has a lot of space and latitude between departments, and
it's not going anywhere anytime fast.
It's not going. You can't turn it quick.
Yeah.
You can't turn it quick. But if it's tight, and because like if a CEO says, we are shifting to digital, everything we do is going to be about digital, and everybody below you sees that as a suggestion as opposed to an edict, then you're not going to be able to turn quickly.
Yeah.
But if people are like, oh, it's digital now, and I look at whatever my world is, I've got to figure out how to make that thing digital, which is such an antiquated notion. Like, we're going to make it digital, but you see what I mean? But like,
right, but you're going to pivot. You're going to change.
Yeah,
you're
going to be able to change.
You're going to be able to do whatever is needed on a dime.
Yeah. So that's organization. I really believe that. The things that I did while I was at Pearson that did kind of change the game in marketing, it was really about people being in lockstep and everybody believing that this is the direction and not evaluating constantly whether this is the right thing to do. Because whether it's the right thing to do, we'll never know if it's the right thing to do if we don't do it.
Right. You won't know until you try it.
Yeah. So these tentative steps, I just think, make it so you actually never know if that was a good idea or not because you really actually never implemented it.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
And it's exciting, right? It's exciting that you are now in a position where you are at the top of a company where you can actually have influence over the way the company thinks and the way that the company operates. So you can be more nimble and you can be more forward thinking.
I want to figure out how I can do this as my primary get down, right? Because I feel like that's a way to kind of impact the world in a way that I can feel good about, but it's also fun.
Yeah.
Like I love making video, right?
Yeah.
It's just amazing, right?
You're preaching to the choir. I love making video, and it can be anything from, something that's maybe not the most exciting and all the way up.
Yeah.
It's just the process is fun. Getting the people involved is fun.
Yeah.
Being there, being on set, the energy that you get from all of it. And then, being able to have some finished product when you're done, whatever its purpose is, and saying, you know what? We did that. We as a group did that. It
just blows me away to just see people when they're free to bring their talent and their creativity to a project, and they're in an atmosphere where the rest of the crew or the rest of the team is open to that. Just what's possible. And like, why would you not want to be a part of that if you have anything to contribute?
Oh yeah.
Just to get in, just to be a part of it.
Anytime you can surround yourself with people who are better than you, people who know,
Not hard for me.
It's great though, isn't it? It's great. That's always been a philosophy, here and anywhere I've worked is, if I'm going to bring people on, it makes no sense to bring someone on who can't help elevate me and the rest of the crew.
Yeah.
Everybody's an expert at something.
Mm-hmm.
And, putting those people in the right places at the right time, giving those people the right opportunities, you get so much from that, and everybody wins.
So watch me bring this back around to education.
Let's do it.
Everybody's good at something.
Yep.
As we start thinking about how you learn, everybody's also good at teaching something, right? What I think we need to be trying to figure out is ways to take those things that someone's good at, right? It doesn't have to be an entire field. It doesn't have to be an entire discipline. It may be like one thing that I'm really good at explaining.
Mm-hmm.
Let's film that.
Yeah.
Let's film you explaining that one thing that you love to explain, that you're really good at. You've done it a million times. And let's put that out there and make that available to someone else who needs to understand that, right?
I've had a thought like that before too.
Yeah.
I was thinking about it more like a web series or a podcast series.
Mm-hmm.
You can learn so much from people who have done something
Yes.
and are good at it.
Yeah, I think that's key. And the other point you made about people that are putting yourself around people who are better than you. I've hired a lot of people in my career, and I'm reaping the benefits of that now because some of the people that were really, really talented young folks have now left Pearson. They've gone on to other places in their career. And some of these people are in places where they can actually, they have a little more latitude, and they're hiring us to do video work.
It's great.
Right? And it's because of those relationships that we built and the fact that as a manager, I've never been someone who's, tries to say like, well, actually, I'm in charge, so I should be speaking here, right? If you know something and you know it better, then I want to be the person that gives you a platform.
Yep.
Right? I do not want to be the one to figure out what's in your head and then try to spin it and say it's mine.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's not what I'm hired to do.
Because what's the point?
Right. I'm a manager. I'm not a spokesperson.
Yeah.
It's all about taking people with the information, with the knowledge, the ability to convey it, and finding the best medium to get that information into the hands and the minds of the audience. And we can't be so tied into has to be a book, has to be software, has to be a video. But how do we let these things work together?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we make it variable so that people who learn in certain ways can figure out the right mix of those tools to get where they need to go? And I think it's really, really important. One of the things that's happened in education is that it's become really transactional because of how much it costs, right? Because of student loans. So people are kind of evaluating what higher education based on like, should I major in this? Well, what does the job pay that I'm going to get when I get out, right? And I completely understand that calculus. The problem is there's a lot of things that you need to know that don't pay anything, or the payoff isn't monetary. Right. So history, really important to know. Things that teach you to think critically don't necessarily pay you the way it would be for you to be a Python coder. And I don't think we're going to be able to turn universities around so that people suddenly decide to be history majors. But what I do think we can do is we can create really interesting history content that's available online that people find fascinating and want to hear this story through video. Drunk history is a good example of that, right?
Amazing.
But how do we take these skills that people really need in order to live life, not just to make money, but to be able to understand around them, be informed consumers of data, all those things we need to try to, undo some of the things that have happened that seem to be taking us down a really scary path. That's not going to happen from everybody being a business major. Right. That's going to happen from people, knowing how to think critically, understanding history, understanding politics, understanding sociology, being able to kind of deal with some abstract concepts around the greater good. And I think video may be the way that we kind of fill in some of the gaps from where that's been lost from higher education because of the financial piece of that.
It'd be amazing if higher education could find a way to provide that to all of their students, right? At the cost of tuition, as a resource, and not just someone who's interested in this class takes this thing and learns that thing, but this is the resource, a blanket resource that you can go and access because you are a part of this institution.
Yeah, I think it should be available there, but I also think that people get to the point where they realize they need to learn this stuff at different times because now I don't think we any longer have the ability to say, hey, you need to learn this. And so now what we're depending on is people getting at certain points in their life or life events making you go, hey, I'd really like to understand that better.
Yeah, curiosity.
Yeah, and if that's what we're waiting on, then we don't want to be like, hey, there's this 4-year period, 5 in my case, where where you have access to this information. We should elongate that.
Sure.
And also then be aware of what are those things that trigger people to want to know this stuff, and figure out ways through the technology to say, hey, you just had a life, you just had a kid.
You might want to take a peek at this.
Yeah, this would be a great time.
This is stories from people who've had kids.
Yeah.
Who are going through the same thing you're going through. Well, you might want to take a peek.
Yeah. So maybe it's lifelong learning.
Yeah.
But the thing about lifelong learning is it shouldn't be happenstance, right? There's some things that we know about when certain information is relevant to people, and if we can get that to them in a Cambridge Analytica type of way,
right,
then maybe we can help.
Right.
Instead of using data to sell people stuff.
Yeah. There's a lot of really good implications that can come from all of that.
Yeah.
Well, I think this was a fantastic
It was a lot
discussion.
of fun. I don't know if anybody wants to watch this, but I do think that we had a good conversation.
It was a win for me, at least.
Yeah.
So before we go, where can people find you? I don't know if you want to.
Oh, yeah. So I've got, I do street photography.
Okay.
So Mumba Jones, Mumba Jones is my Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I think my Twitter handle now, it fluctuates, is MJ Uppercuts, which, I go pretty hard. So, it's not a place for everyone.
That's fair. And Enlight?
And Enlight, we are enlightmedia.net.
Okay.
Because somebody owns enlightmedia.com, but they're not doing anything on it.
Ugh.
And we tried to buy it, and I made a decent offer.
Sure.
And they were just like, no
thanks.
Yeah, no. I'm like, dude, but now that we have .net, doesn't that drive down the value of .com?
You would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I offered them $10 and they were like, no.
Next time, come in hard with 11.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something 99. I think that's
anything 99 because it's not the full price.
Yeah, $13.99.
13. That's not $14. I can do it. Yeah.
No, they weren't having it.
All right, well, thank you so much, Patrice.
All right.
This was great.
Do we shake on it? Well, I
feel like we should
because it's
awesome.
It's video.
Very good.
I keep forgetting. I think it's audio, and then I'm like, oh, that's me. I should have looked at the camera more.
Ideas always go further when they're shared. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a review on iTunes or drop us a comment on YouTube. Let us know what you think about this show's topic. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.